Last time we went through, like, we're right in the middle of the selection tools, and in the last video we went all the way through extrude, extract, and offset. What I want to cover in this video is tube handle, bridge, join, weld boundaries. These are all somewhat connected tools in that they allow you to kind of bring two different STL files together. The bridge tool, or not the bridge tool, sorry, the tube handle tool, I've never used before. I'm just throwing it in there for completeness sake. You might at times find a use for it. I already thought of one, and that's if you're doing kind of some stuff in advanced surgical guides and you had two tubes that you want to connect them because you're going to maybe print it in metal, and you want to do a guide that is more like a skeleton guide that's holding those tubes. You might be able to use this one to connect the tubes together. Okay, and you'll see what I mean in a second. I've got a second bunny that I brought in, and we're going to we're going to hold down shift and click on the other bunny and combine them. This now makes them connected into the same file. And I'm going to type S on the keyboard to get my selection tool, and I'm just going to select an area here and an area directly across like this. So I've got these two selections. If I go over to tube handle, notice what it does, and let's turn our triangles on, our wireframe on, so we can see what's going on. What it does is it connects these two objects where my selection was with the tube. Okay, and my understanding is if this appeared more like an hourglass, I think this will show it. Yeah, if it looks more like this, then click this, uncheck the box to unflip it. I think what that means is that the ones on the top over here are going to the ones on the bottom over here, and just because the software doesn't know which way is up. And so if you click the flip orientation, that fixes that. And then just like most tools, the refining, if you pull it all the way down, it has one triangle going from one side to the other. And I'd recommend always trying to get something that's similar between this side, and those triangles look pretty good. So I'm going to hit accept. Clear selection. You can see that it made a new face group, but you can also see inside, notice how this is going straight through to the other one. So it creates new triangles, but it also deletes the holes so that it makes a tube. Okay. Notice if you're in one object and you click from one side to the other and then you do a tube handle, it actually tunnels right through the object. And so that, depending on what you're trying to do, that might be useful. If you do it like something like this, you can pierce the ear of the rabbit. So that's what the tube handle does, is it basically just takes two and connects them with a tube. Either goes through the object or it goes into the object. So I'm just going to hit undo to get back to our original bunny. And I'm going to take this guy right here and delete him. All right, so that's all I'm going to show on the tube handle tool. And let's see what's next. Bridging. Okay, I'm going to just show a couple examples of bridging. Where I use bridging most is probably when I'm cleaning up an intraoral scan, because there might be areas on that intraoral scan where it missed data. So it's kind of coming in like this. And I don't want to trim my model up here. I want to trim it down here. And normally this is on the patient's gingiva. Normally it's like unattached gingiva that just didn't scan well. And so what I'll do is select the edges right here, hold down Control B, and then hit accept. And one of the things that's the most common errors I get in this is when I go on to the next one and I try it again, and it says error, it's not working. The reason is you can't have this selected, yet it stays selected when the tool's done. So you just want to hit S again, and that'll deselect that, and you come through again. So Control B is the shortcut, or you just type this. Just to look at this is no different than other refines. If you do like that, it comes down to just one triangle that spans the gap. And if you come all the way up to the top, you can see the triangles are getting very small. So depending on what you need that to be, you can play around with that or just leave it at the default. One thing I'll note is that if I have an area that I'm trying to get a flat connection between, which sometimes I want, I'll go ahead and I'll do this one right here. And then after it's made it flat, then I'll do the remesh like we've looked at before. You know, then I can come in right here and start changing those triangles to something that I wanted it to be, okay? And then once you do this, and we'll talk more about the inspector later, but once you do that, then you come through and you can fill in those holes, and it does a decent enough job at giving you the opportunity to extend your model down a little bit more. And you'll see that more when we get into the dental applications. Another useful tool for bridging is, and a good example of this is when I'm playing around with digital dentures and I want to get a scan of somebody's denture, but I want to do it with a desktop scanner rather than an intraoral scanner, where I can put the denture in the scanner, scan the intaglio, and then flip it around and scan the cameo surface, but the scanner doesn't give me back a single file, it gives me back two files that are already aligned, and then I have to go through and kind of cut it down so I just have a cameo and an intaglio surface, and I need to connect the two. I can do something like that to do it. And I just want to show you with this, oops, wrong one, actually deleted that. I'm going to take these two here and combine these, okay? And when you go to combine these, you can then select one side and then the other, and then control, oh, let me back up, okay? So right now, if I were to use the inspector, notice that it sees two holes. The hole that's the bottom of this STL and the hole that's the one of this STL, the bottom of this STL. So if you just connect one spot, and normally I do more, but if you just connect one spot like that, then you run the inspector tool, see how it's now one hole, because it starts here and it ends all the way over here. So if I click on that, see how now I've connected those together. Imagine that this was the cameo and this is the intaglio surface of that denture, and now they've just been connected. Now they're one STL file. And so we're gonna just undo this, undo until we get to here, clear selection. Okay, so that's the idea with the bridging tool, is that it allows you to take triangles here and triangles here and add triangles in between, okay? Join does a similar thing. Sometimes that's the fastest way to connect the intaglio and cameo surface, but sometimes it fails, okay? And that's why I like having the bridging in my back pocket. But if you have, and I'm gonna make these all the same color. If you double click on the edge, it's getting messed up through here for some reason. And then you double click on the edge of, so this is a situation where you have two different open boundaries is what they call them, but you have these open areas that go from, that are in two different objects that have a distance to span, and you choose the option to join, and there's no settings that you can tweak. Once you hit join, it just joins them, okay? And you can see that this is where you started, where that blue line is where your boundary started. So it actually kind of removes the boundary. So you, unlike the other one where we used a combination of bridging and the analysis tool, the inspector tool, that left a very, it left my boundaries in place, left all the detail in place. This one takes some of that away. So if you need this to be accurate, then don't use join, okay? And the rationale behind this, in my understanding from reading the manual, is that Mesh Mixer is telling you that joining is not trusting the triangles at the edge, and so it's actually going back a couple layers and maintaining the ones that are a couple layers back. So if we hit cancel and we look at the triangles up in here beyond my selection, and I'm going to hit J for join, and just notice that these all stay the same, but it's the ones below it that change. So you hit accept, hit clear selection, you can see that it just joined the two together. Okay, so that's an option as well. And then let's see, this next one, weld boundaries. Welding boundaries is a very useful tool when used in the right circumstance. And so let me just show you a couple things. Welding boundaries, the triangles have to be like right there and just not connected. And so for example, if I were to double click on this to select that face group and hit Y to separate them, see how these are separate, but the triangles are just right there, okay? I can click like this, combine these two, so now they're on the same STL, and I can take this selection right here and go through here and weld the boundaries, hit accept, and you can see that now they're connected together, okay? I'm gonna undo a few times so we can get back to where we started, because I want to just show you that the triangles truly do have to be connected. So I'm going to say clear selection. If you try and select here, and you go and you say weld boundary, notice that it doesn't work, okay? Another thing that they recommend if you're in a situation like that, let's say you have a small part of a model that you want to combine, but there's a gap. There is a sculpting tool, and we're going to talk about sculpting later, but this tool has really one indication that I'm aware of, and that's to do just what this tool needs. See how it's pulling them together? It's pulling them together, but it's not connecting them together. So if you want to pull them together and then go and select the two different sides, then you can weld the boundary, hit accept, and see now they're actually connected together. So if I were to expand to connected, it goes across that gap because they're now connected together. So those are things that you can do to take a gap that needs to be connected and it just welds it together, okay? And so that's that, and that's it. That's what we're covering in this video. In the next video, we're going to go through probably the rest of these just to kind of finish it out. And then here, let's do separate in this video. So if you notice, there's two ways that I use separate, okay? One of them I already showed you, and that's if I double click on this rabbit here and I want it to be separate from this one, I hit Y for separate, and now they're two separate STL files, okay? The other thing that I would use separate for, and that's assuming they started off as two separate ones. So for example, if I were to bring in another bunny, okay, and this other object was combined, let me say this a little different. Separate is kind of the opposite of combine. So combine takes a bunch of different STL files and it combines them together. Meaning if I want to just 3D print these bunnies just like you see them now, minus I'd have to close these holes, but if I want to 3D print these bunnies like this, I can combine them, send them to the 3D printing software, and it prints just fine. Because the printer doesn't care that they're not actually connected. It will print them together even though they're separate STL files, just because they're in that proximity to each other. But if you have done this and you want to separate it out, then you can just take one, either double click, if it's all one color, it works to double click. Otherwise, you click on one and you type E for expand to connected, and then Y to separate it out. Okay, so that's an option with separate. The other thing that you can do with separate Here, let's do it to this guy too. Separate. This one we're actually going to delete, and then we're down to our original bunny. The other thing that you can do is separate is take a part of an STL file, hit Y, and now it's separated out. Okay, and when I say separated out, it's detached. Okay, so I probably use that less than when I have two different STL files that are combined and I want to separate them. It's very common that you want to combine stuff, but then later separate it. Okay, and always when I have things that are combined that I want to separate, always it's click on it, expand to connected, Y for separate, and now it's its own STL file that at any point I could go back in and recombine it. All right, hopefully that gives you some things to play around with.